Welcome everybody in the Off the Ball Network fandom and beyond to your, I hope it has now become your Monday night ritual of tuning into the Bunts and Bruises podcast here on the Off the Ball Network. Of course, catching us live as of right now on the OTB on Facebook and Twitter, as well as our own YouTube page. And as always, one of your hosts on this beautiful, beautiful program, the hockey connoisseur, as some of my friends call me, the hockey guy at Off the Ball Network, Jurg, coming at you. And we got big hockey talk to go over today. Of course, I'm not alone, as every single week I am joined by one of the best in the business, the hit king of the Bunts and Bruises podcast, my guy James Barcia. James, how we doing? You're looking good tonight, man.
You know, I just had to get fresh, Jurg. We have a special guest tonight, and, I put on only the best for the guests. For you, I got to put on something. I get comfy. I feel like I'm right at home when it's just us, Jurg. But, we're going out. We got a nice little date tonight. I had to put on my cute little hat, my cute little button up. We're good to go, Jurg. We got a bunch of stuff going on. We got hockey. Unfortunately, it's coming towards the end of hockey. But good thing for sports, there's the best part, which is the off season. But just before we get to the off season, we're here. We got to talk about the most important part, what you fight for, and that's the one, the only legendary Stanley Cup. But then after that, we're gonna go ahead and talk a little baseball. But you know what, Jurg? Let's stop hiding all this, man. Let's still talk about the main important part of this episode. Go ahead, bring them in, Jurg. Bring them in. Introduce them.
Yes, of course. So before we bring in our very special guest tonight, first appearance on the show, but I'm already going to call him a friend of the show just because he's just that chill of a dude. But of course, right before we do that, Bunts and Bruises, just like the last couple weeks, is brought to you guys by monkeyknifefight.com. As they've been doing the last couple weeks, friends of Off the Ball Network. We've been presenting them the last few weeks. And of course, like James said, because hockey season is almost over, there's only a little bit of time left to take advantage of what they're doing with their goal rush. You pick up to 3 players on any given game. Of course, from this point on being the Stanley Cup Final games, if you pick 3 guys and they all hit, they score goals, you get a share of a jackpot. And hey, don't worry, because if no one wins, it rolls over and it's another $100. Same thing with their home run derby, James. We've said it the last few weeks and we're going to say it again. This is absolutely awesome value to get. Just picking any 3 guys to either score a goal for hockey or hit 3 homers for baseball.
And let me tell you, Jurg, with these 2 teams that are playing, especially now that you got the returning reigning champs in the Tampa Bay Lightning against the Montreal Canadiens, I don't even know how to describe them. The Cinderella story, the underdog, I don't even want to call them the Canadiens. They carry prices because that's the only reason they're here. Let's get that straight. But still, you got 2 of the best teams in the league. Honestly, it's the easiest way. You could pick 3 people to pick goals, but don't forget, when you use that promo code Off the Ball, you get $50 match. That's free money right there. Free money. So you get free extra $50. Make it 100, and now you become a millionaire. That's what we do. We make dreams come true on this show, Jurg. We make dreams come true.
And speaking of dreams come true, so far all our guests up to this point have been our OTBN guys, and like James alluded to, it is a very special night tonight, as for the first time we welcome our first ever non-Off the Ball Network affiliated guests. Of course, we love our guys at Off the Ball Network. Ain't no better network out there. But of course, we are very excited to branch out and have our first guest come from outside. And boy, do we have a guest for you guys. So for anyone familiar with all the hockey stuff I've done for the network, you may have seen this amazing gentleman before. As a couple months back, I did a little special episode going into the NHL season with this man. And I am very happy to bring him back on here on this episode of Bunts and Bruises for him to talk hockey and baseball with us. Of course, he is a key contributor to Primetime Sports Talk and the Barn Burner Network. He has also done fantastic work with Fansided, with the Toronto Observer, with the Toronto Marlies, the Toronto Maple Leafs AHL affiliate team. This dude is masterful with the pen, I guess technically keyboard when he types, but masterful with the pen with his writing, masterful on the mic when he speaks. He is one of the best sports minds in the business today, and I am very happy to have him on. Our special guest tonight, Logan Lockhart.
Jurg, thank you very much. And James, yes, you did dress up for the guest. That's good. I feel honored that for the first non-guest from the network, James decided to not be comfortable. He said he was usually comfortable when it's just you and Jurg, but it's an honor. It really is.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on. Like I said, when you came on a couple months ago, it was the first time like we had ever done anything together, and we discovered like our work from it. of course, do fantastic stuff on both sides. And that's one of the reasons why I was excited to bring you on here, because, when me and James were talking about doing the show, baseball and hockey, we know that was our thing. So it's like, all right, can't wait. Like some weeks is just going to be mainly hockey. Some weeks is just going to be baseball. But we got a perfect blend here tonight. You are a jack of all trades. Don't doubt this man's NBA and NFL too, by the way. He knows his stuff. But tonight specifically, it's about hockey and baseball. And Logan, we're very happy to have you on here joining us. But of course, before we dive into the nitty gritty of both those amazing sports worlds, we got to let the people get to know you a little bit. And this is not our getting to know you segment, as we have done the last couple of weeks with previous guests. But this would be a quick little interview so the people really get to know you. So myself and James, we've talked about it. In the initial episodes, we spoke briefly on it. But the sports media as a whole, of course, doing this podcast, it counts as media. So we come out here every single week, and then we put it up wherever you can listen to podcasts, and you guys just listen to us. And obviously, it's a big decision to want to do this on a consistent basis. It was kind of a running joke early on. It's like we're in the top however many % each and every week, because a lot of people, they give up on podcasts because for some people it's just too much, and for some people they don't realize how much work it takes. And so Logan, yourself, just like myself and James, you understood that, and to continue to do it is obviously a testament to how much effort you put in. So kind of give the people a little bit of your background. What got you into the sports media world as a whole, and what made you want to pursue this?
Well, I think the answers are similar for a lot of people at the beginning, but like you say, I don't think people do realize that it is this constant grind. And people don't like the word grind. It's a cliche, but I think what you just said is very accurate. And for me in particular, I'm sure it goes and stems back to why you guys are doing this too. And we love sports. We're passionate about it. It's not a joke to us, right? We take it seriously. We care about what we're talking about, and we show that care to the people that are listening. And we want to do that. We genuinely do. And I think that's where it all stems from.
And you said it best right there. Essentially, it boils down to passion and wanting to do this. And passion is a big thing when it comes to sports. It's funny, like when you hear these guys, when they sometimes say in interviews, they drop that word passion. It's like some people, they kind of take it for granted, but it's like, you got to understand, like for these professional athletes, they are perfecting a craft for well over a decade to get to this point. You can't say someone doesn't have a passion when you think about all the time it takes to get to that level. And it's really the same thing here when it comes to that, where it's like all the hours that you need to do in terms of researching, making sure you're ready for a show, and just knowing about the sport, obviously, because when you go into this, you got to learn about the sport, the players, the coaches, the game in general, and how to play it. And so that's something that obviously you need to have a lot of. And to get to this point for all of us respectively, and especially for yourself, I said it at the top, but you've done some good work so far with Fansided, with the Toronto Observer, and currently what you're doing right now. It's all excellent. I'm going to continue to say it, but you've definitely worked hard, and you definitely deserve what you've done so far, and it's only more to come. James, I know like this is the first time you and Logan are speaking. I know you got some questions for him as well. I'll let you shoot off.
For sure. I mean, I got a bunch of questions, but we're going to start with, well, first of all, I wanted to say if this was getting to know you, everyone knows I would have won it, because Jurg he chokes, but he figures it out at the last second. That's
Who won the last one? Who won the last one?
Kid. You got
Exactly.
lucky. You got lucky.
Irregardless.
After, going through your profile and whatnot, because I am a person who does my research, of course, Logan, I've seen that you are a Texan Rangers writer, fan, I'm assuming, as well. So I just was curious, what is your thoughts behind the Texas Rangers, and what made you decide, like, is it just, your home team? Is that what made you decide? What made you decide exactly besides them? What other teams that you've chosen to write and support about?
Well, you know what? When it comes to writing about particular teams, it's all about time and a place, wherever things lead you. The Rangers are in an interesting spot right now. It's a rebuilding team that has never really committed themselves to a full-out rebuild. There was talks before 2020 that they can contend. I think that me writing about the Rangers, it's a very challenging time. And I asked T.R. Sullivan once, he used to write for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, and then he went to MLB.com. And I said, well, in a season that's long and the team's not playing well, what do you write about? How do you think of ideas to write? And he said, just state the fact, whatever it is, and people will read it. And that's what's most important. I think the Rangers are a challenging team right now to write about, but I think that's a good challenge. And I would tell people, if you want to write about a particular team, you don't always necessarily go with who you like, who you grew up liking as a kid, but kind of just pick what are you interested in and what challenges do you think you can get from that. I think the Rangers are a really curious team to write about right now.
I love how you just said that, Logan, because honestly, we run a segment, I'm not sure if Jurg told you, it's called How to Be a Fanatic, where every week we pick a random city, and hopefully the city has, hockey and a baseball team. If not, we go as close as possible. And every week, me and Jurg each give 5 reasons for why a person should be a fan of that team. And I can't lie, man. It's impressive that you're here writing articles about the Texas Rangers, because I struggle trying to pull some of these small market teams or rebuilding teams and just making something of it. I struggle with just making 5 reasons of why you should be a fan. So to write an article every year of something like this, especially a rebuilding team like the Texas Rangers, because you're right, they've never 100% fully committed to the rebuild. So that kind of makes it even more difficult to talk about exactly, what to look forward to or what to not look forward to, because there's always an X factor there almost. It's almost a question mark. So that's a very interesting fact of why you said you write about the Rangers. I'm actually curious, what's your team on the NHL side?
Well, I'm originally from Toronto, and of course, Toronto Maple Leafs are a big deal in Toronto. Now, it's funny with the Leafs because it is a hockey city, and it reminds me, you just mentioned that game, playing that. First of all, it sounds like a fun game. I'd like to play it. Picking a city and thinking of reasons why someone should be a fan of that team. When it comes to the Leafs in particular, this is like a hockey city in the sense of there's not another sport. Don't listen to what anyone says. There's not another sport or team that's ever going to compete with the Leafs in Toronto. Take my word for it. It's never going to happen. And I think that'd be another interesting game. You can go through city to city and say, okay, well, that's a baseball town. That's a basketball town. This is absolutely a football town. I mean, let's not fool around, right? And this is a hockey town, right? That's another game we can play.
For sure. That's actually, it'd be crazy. I would like to see how that breaks up into, because on the East Coast, I can imagine we're going to have all the basketball heads over there. And more south, you're going to see more of the football, gridiron, those Texas states where they got 6'10" linebackers coming out from like 8th grade. West side, I'm not even sure. That could go either way. So that's actually would be a real fun. Jurg, write it down on your notebook or where we got to put it down. We might have to steal that from Logan as a segment before he puts on his own show.
Borrowing, we'll say it, borrowing. But no, that's definitely something. Logan has an all-access pass whenever he wants to come back on the show. So whenever he wants to come back on, we could break this down. We could do a whole show based off of that. Go across some of the major cities and, dictate what they are. I think our guys at the network would love to have a conversation about that as well. So that could definitely be something in the hands of the future. But James, what I like that you asked Logan there about his stuff with the Rangers, I want to key in about some of the writing you've done, Logan. And if it's also been in your reporting or podcasting, you could kind of add this as well. For myself, a lot of my writing, I've written for the network, but a lot of my early writing was actually with college. And one of my favorite things I just loved doing in college was the interviews. And it wasn't anything complicated. It wasn't anything crazy, even at a Division II level NCAA school. But I just liked, getting to speak a little bit with the athletes, whether it was to do a profile or talk about the game that just happened or a big game coming up. Like, I love the whole sit-down interview and just getting to know them, like where their mind is at. That's just something that's always captured me, because I love the art of an interview. Like, to do an interview, whether it's 5 minutes, 20 minutes, like it takes a lot to make sure you're prepared and let the person know, like, hey, just let it all out there. So is there any, whether it was in college for yourself or some of the work you've done since, is there like a interview that you were maybe really excited to like get to do, or one that, going into it, you, not to say it didn't have expectations in a bad way, but just like you're going to do it and you end up being like, oh, this was one of the best interviews or experiences I've ever had?
Yeah, it's funny. It actually happened recently too. Did a story for the GTHL in Toronto. It's one of the minor hockey associations. And I interviewed Rain Carnegie. His grandfather is one of the first black hockey players ever. And Rain started a petition last year to get his grandfather Herb into the Hockey Hall of Fame. He believes that he should be in the Hall of Fame. And that's what the interview was originally supposed to be about. But then I talked to him for about half an hour, and he started talking about his life and this and that. And I was so fascinated that the story completely changed, and it was about his life and how he's a new man and he's got a newfound voice. And his grandfather became secondary to the whole thing. So like you say, you like interviewing college athletes. You never know what story is going to come out of it, right? You can have a sit down. You never know what they're going to say. And then you can just shift your whole approach. I think that's a lot of fun about it too.
Oh, yeah. I definitely had quite the crazy interview myself one time at my college with one of the soccer players. And it just like, I did it just for an assignment actually, because it was for one of my journalism classes. And it delved into one of like the craziest stories I've ever heard. I'm like, whoa, this is wild. This is absolutely insane. So like, it's just that excitement when it comes to interviews where it's like, you say yourself, it's like you'll go in thinking it's okay, it's going to be about this, but then you'll just learn something absolutely new. I think that's one of the best things about, just getting to be involved in this overall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, it's a privilege to talk to somebody who's got a good story to begin with. And then when you can get something out of them, it's the icing on the cake, right? And then it's like, it's gravy, really. It's a lot of fun, first of all, to tell a story of somebody else, because they're going to be real interested in what you're writing about them, right? They're going to read it, right? There's no doubt about it. So there's a little bit of pressure there, but at the end of the day, they really want you to do a good job. And your number one fan sometimes could be the person you interviewed.
Well, usually my number one fan is my mom. So that's why our viewers doubled from 1 to 2, because then Jurg mom started hopping onto the podcast. And, after that, we've been taking off. We went from 2 to 4, and now we're somewhere in the hundreds to thousands, which I'm loving. But like you said, Logan, we're talking about your favorite interviews and just stories that come out of interviews. My question is, what are some of the we were speaking earlier of how it's hard with the constant grind. That was the word you used, which a lot of people hate because it's cliche, but it is what it is. It's a grind to do this, man. Sometimes you got to do some of the dirty work. So aside from your favorite interview and some of your favorite things, such as interviewing, because let's be honest, this is the easy part of the job right here, is having a great time, chilling with my best friend. I hang out every day on Monday, talking, making new friends right here. What was one of the hardest things, or one of the hardest interviews, or just something about the job at all you didn't like that, viewers and listeners don't really realize comes with the job?
Yeah, you know what? One of the first interviews, I think real interviews, it was in Tampa and Dunedin, actually, specifically. It was at a minor league Blue Jays spring training, and I interviewed a pitcher, and the interview kind of got away from me a little bit. I didn't really know exactly where we should be going with this, right? The story took a lot of work afterwards with the editor to find out, okay, what did he say? What is he even saying? Because the questions really weren't that good at the time. And I thought they were good. Turns out they really weren't. So it's tough. When you don't get good questions in, you're taking chances, right? I got lucky. He ended up giving me good answers through pretty poor questions. But it's tough. I mean, what if he didn't give me good answers? What am I going to write about? The sun? It's not going to happen.
I feel that pain, because for myself personally, one of the first stories I did when I started writing for my college paper, I did 2 athlete profiles early on, and one of them was absolutely phenomenal with one of the soccer players. We hit it off, like the questions, it was bang bang on both sides. It was beautiful. But then I interviewed one of the tennis players, and this is where like I studied up, but it's like, oh man, like I very similar situation to you. Some of my questions were kind of like, 50-50, and I was very happy. They served it back to me with some pretty good answers. I'm like, I got saved right here. I got saved. But yeah, James, you kind of mentioned that. Logan, you could definitely attest to this. It's like people don't understand when it comes to the interviews. It's like the thought process, the being very meticulous with your questions to make sure you have a good batch ready. Like that's pretty important, because and it's not necessarily you're going to hit on all of them, but maybe you get lucky and that one question you think of, it'll lead to 2 follow-ups during the interview, and then you're set.
Yeah, you know what? And the other thing is, we're doing everything virtually right now. It says one thing: when you were with someone in person, you can sit down next to them, you can make them comfortable, you can have a conversation beforehand. I mean, what are you doing now? You go on Zoom, and then you kind of have about 10 seconds to really get that first impression down good, to make your interview subject comfortable. And if you miss and you fail at doing that, you might be in trouble, right? So it's very important now. It's delicate virtually, right? It's not that human interaction. So people, I think, got to be very careful.
Absolutely, when it comes to that. James, any final questions you want to ask our man?
See, he just proved the reason why I had to come dressed looking fresh, man. It was the first impression within 5 seconds. That was it. I had to do it.
Hey, there it is. And again, the beauty of questions. Sometimes the person's answer, it'll answer everything you thought of. It's like, oh, you gave it right to me. Gave it right to me. That's the beauty of it. Speaking of the beauty of it, and all of this, let's get down to it, boys. It's the big time. The game is going on right now as we speak. The Stanley Cup Final are upon us after the long, grueling grind of the playoffs. What, by the way, lived up to the hype, I got to say. It was pretty good if you ask me. We have the two final teams, and oh boy, it couldn't be any, more of a complete 180 between them. You have the Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Logan, of course, you and myself, we have been, closely looking at both these teams from the very start of the season. They were two teams that we highlighted upon heavily back in the preseason in that episode we did. And here, who would have thought all this time later we're going to get to these two teams? But of course, James, out of everyone, he's been going through all this. James, you had some funny notions about this because you were pushing the Islanders, I don't know, bandwagon, what you want to call it, the entire time, and you wanted them to be the Cinderella team. But of course, Montreal proves to be that. So I want to ask James really fast before we continue. James, are you going to root for Montreal to be as the Cinderella team for revenge for the Islanders, or what's going on here?
It's not revenge for the Islanders. I'm rooting for Montreal because I never heard of the guy until we started this podcast, and because you brought him up when the very moment the playoffs started. You mentioned Carey Price because he was just straight dominant that first series. And then after watching him, man, it was like watching Jacob deGrom on the mound or something. He has just been straight. It's insane just watching what he's done. He's literally put this Montreal team on his back and taken them to the Stanley Cup Finals. And Jurg, gotta give credit where credit's due. You were the first person to tell me all it takes is amazing goalie play and you can end up in a Stanley Cup Final. And here we are with, like you just said, a complete 180 of difference between teams. You got the ultimate David versus Goliath story here. And hopefully Carey Price could, keep doing what he's doing and finish the job, and Montreal could just win a chip. I mean, I don't want to root for Canada. I want to, root for good old USA. But hey, Carey Price won my heart, man. I might have to cop that jersey.
Hey, that means a lot. That means a lot. I've been convincing James here, Logan. I've been telling him there are some very good jerseys in the NHL, and what better time to get a Carey Price jersey than even if they don't win, like just this run alone, you want to get it. But if they win, that jersey, it may skyrocket to number one by the end of the season. So. Like you said there, James, it's the ultimate David versus Goliath. Logan, I'm going to throw this first one out to you. Just this journey of watching Montreal this entire time. 4 more wins. And like James said, the ultimate David versus Goliath. They kind of had that in 2 of the 3 rounds. It was Toronto in round 1. Then it was Vegas, who a lot of people favored heavily coming in. And now it's Tampa Bay. So just your thoughts to this amazing run by Montreal.
David versus Goliath, absolutely. The Goliaths, let's be honest here, are the 2 goaltenders. So that's the matchup right there. So both goaltenders are dynamite. We know that. It's going to be a good matchup. Price is not matched up against a goaltender like this for the entire playoff run. The last time Montreal's made it this far was in 1993. But the last time they made it to the conference final was 2014. Price got them there as well. It was the same formula. And then he got injured in the first 2 games. It was against the Rangers. He never got a chance to finish that series and to bring Montreal to this point that they are in 2021. So this is a little bit of a redemption story. I know people in Montreal, they still talk about 2014, saying if Price was healthy, we would have won the cup. That's what they say. But this Tampa team, this isn't a joke right now, okay? We used to talk about 5-6 years ago, we used to say you can't win back-to-back in the NHL, okay? There's too much parity. And then Pittsburgh won back-to-back cups. And now here we are, and Tampa's looking like this is kind of their era now. I don't know where Tampa's going to be next year or the year after. Their salary cap situation is always dicey. Okay, I don't even know what to say about it. But here we are in a position where Tampa, they have an opportunity to win 2 Stanley Cups in 9.5 months, right? It was late September last time. And here we are, and it might be early July that they can do it here. So a short period of time, they can capitalize on it. Montreal, though, they've shut down teams like Tampa. Toronto, they're Tampa light. Vegas, Tampa light. But now they get the real Tampa. We've seen Montreal shut them down, though. I think in any final, historically, it's a coin flip. So I think that's what everyone, whether you're a Habs fan, a Lightning fan, just a hockey fan, you got to be thinking about it. It's a coin flip at this point.
Definitely when it comes to that. James, he said it the true battle here is going to be the goalies because, and I was talking about this, I believe, with Kenneth actually, where you have the two best goalies we've seen so far from this season in terms of Vasilevsky. I think to this point we could say in the regular season was the best goalie in the league. Like, of course, Fleury was phenomenal. Philip Grubauer, he definitely deserves his credit. But Tampa Bay was different whenever Vasilevsky was in net. You saw the drop off when they would put in McElhinney or Gibson or someone else. Like, it was day and night with that team compared to if it was Vasilevsky or someone else. So I would say regular season best goalie. And of course, also because like the Vezina, he's probably going to win that. Of course, we're still waiting on some of the final awards, but he's the favorite to many to be awarded the Vezina officially. But then we switch over to the playoffs. And like Logan said, Carey Price has been that dude straight up. And to his point, and me and Kenneth, again, we were bringing this up. Just look at the last few times that Montreal has been in the postseason. Their eliminations are not because of Carey Price. You look at his stats, you look at his, again, you can't look at win-loss record when it comes to the goalies is the first thing. You got to look at save percentage and you got to look at goals against. And his goals against and save percentage have been Hall of Fame, like if you look at like the last 4 runs, whenever Montreal's actually made the playoffs. And it all goes back to that year in 2014 when he was on just another level. Like 2014-15, that was peak Carey Price. That was peak the window of contention for Montreal. And when he got hurt, when the fall off from that started to happen, there was worries of like, okay, the window is done here. Of course, then they extended him. And it's like, with a Carey Price, you could always win, but what about the team in front of him? But now we've finally seen what happens when the team in front of him is finally firing. And him being healthy makes all the difference in the world for that. So I'm definitely with you, Logan. Like this is a pure coin flip. I know James. Like I've been getting James into this. I've officially converted him into like a full-time hockey fan, I think, and I'm very proud of that. I know James is happy to hear that.
I can't lie, Jurg. I the tenfold the amount of hockey I've watched within the recent months. But Logan, my question for you is, so obviously we've been talking about how much of a David versus Goliath story this whole Stanley Cup Final is going to be. So what do the Montreal Canadiens need to do to actually be able to become David and beat Goliath? What needs to get done here aside from Carey Price being Carey Price and keep doing what he's doing? What's that extra little flair they need?
You know what? I think Montreal needs to stick to the formula because it could work. The Islanders had the same formula, by the way. It went to Game 7. It was 1-0 Tampa, right? Mm-hmm. The formula was there. So there is a path to beat the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Montreal Canadiens have a playoff team. And I know people will say, of course they do. They're in the playoffs. No. I mean, Marc Bergevin has built a playoff team here. You saw it in the bubble in 2020. You saw flashes of it. In 2021, it really is a playoff team. And now Carey Price is great. Of course, his numbers are fantastic. I'm going to say that there have been a couple teams here. Toronto later in that series, Vegas, absolutely, and Winnipeg, absolutely. They didn't make Price's job difficult enough. And Tampa is the team to make any goalie's job difficult. They're the team to kind of pressure you. And you don't want to go on the penalty kill against Tampa, by the way, either. That's another part. Montreal's got to stick to it. Philip Deneau has been an incredible shutdown center for them. He is kind of in the Conn Smythe mix right now. That's how good he is. And he's a two-way center. I can't remember the last time we've seen something like that. So you got to remember Montreal's big 4 defensemen. That's the formula there. They got to stick with it. If the Islanders almost did it, Montreal can do it. Absolutely. We can have the debate of who's a better team, the Islanders or Montreal. That's a debate. But the Islanders had a path. Now, I will say this, and I think this is really interesting. Pierre LeBrun from The Athletic did a poll around the same time, Jurg, that we did the preseason show. And he asked the American general managers for the American teams. He asked them to rank 1 to 7 who are the best teams in Canada. Right? They're not biased. They're not playing it. They got their own division. Montreal was a close second to Toronto. Right? They were ahead of Edmonton and Winnipeg. And a lot of GMs already knew that Montreal was built for the playoffs, and now you're seeing it.
For sure. And I'm glad how you mentioned that the Islanders were built as a playoff team as well, because actually going into the playoffs, there was a lot of people who were down on the Islanders thinking they weren't going to make such a run. There was a lot of people down on the Canadiens didn't think that had zero shot of making it all the way here to a final. So that's something very different that's in hockey that I've noticed that's different from other sports. When you call a team a playoff team, it's almost like basketball when the Knicks, they were dominating defensively the whole regular season. But once playoffs came, every other team started playing up to that gear that the Knicks have been playing all regular season. So it's almost like just the makeup of a team fits more perfectly for the playoffs for our casual listeners who are learning just like me. And I'm starting to pick up on that. Just because a team isn't looking too hot in the regular season doesn't mean they can't make a huge run during the playoffs, which is just, it's you love hearing that in any sport almost.
Exactly. And Trae Young broke my heart in the first round, by the way. I wasn't too thrilled about that. But yeah, you got to have a playoff team. It's interesting with the Islanders. You know, they really were built for the playoffs. I love the Islanders coming into the playoffs. I thought they would go to the third round. And then it was getting dicey. But I was all about them because of that fact alone. They're built for the playoffs.
No, yeah, I definitely, like you said, James, with teaching people, in hockey, being called a playoff team is a very good thing. Like you want to hear that you're built to be a playoff team, because then that means when you get to the dance, you can make something happen. And both teams are definitely built. Like, the reason myself personally, I was starting to wane a little bit on the Islanders going in was just because of the fact that the combination of Varlamov and Sorokin, they had some good games, but it was kind of looking just a little bit shaky at the end of the regular season. And then the goal scoring, like it's one thing if the goal scoring tatters off just a little bit come the playoffs, like that I can get by, because then you know for sure they're gonna supersede it. But it almost completely dried up. And they were losing games constantly, 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. I think it was back-to-back games against the Capitals where they literally lost 1-0 or something along those lines. So that was my only reason why I viewed the Islanders as kind of shaky coming in. But once they took it against Pittsburgh, once they tied it up against Pittsburgh, I knew it's like, okay, the Islanders they're going to take down the Pens, because the Pens they forced the Penguins to go away from their game plan. So like what Logan's been talking about, if you can force the other team to deviate away from their game plan, that's how you know you have them in a series. The Islanders did that to the Penguins. The Islanders did that to the Bruins. They just kind of got unlucky because of the team that they went up against. I've said this the entire year. I picked it from last season. I've had the Lightning repeating the entire time, and it was for that reason, where it needs to take a very specific set of circumstances for you to be able to get them in that situation. And like you said, Logan, they were this close. The Islanders were this close. But Tampa Bay just had that final extra tinge to them. And again, this is how key goaltending is, because we've talked about it with Montreal, right? Vasilevsky, like we're talking about Conn Smythe on both sides here, Denault and Carey Price for Montreal. Let's talk about Andrei Vasilevsky for the Conn Smythe award as well, because he has been phenomenal. I think he's registered, if I'm not mistaken, 2 shutouts in the playoffs to this point, 2 or 3. Early in the Carolina series, where Tampa Bay's offense could not get going, they won back-to-back games, 2-1 at the beginning of the series. And then that one off night, I remember saying this to James, he had the off game 4 where the offense helped him out against Carolina. And the second he had that off game, it's like, okay, next game, he's going to blank him out. Like, he's not going to let more than one goal past them in game 5. And that's exactly what happened in that game. So you have two, look, we said it, 2 very good goalies in this. And Vasilevsky, if there's any goalie, I think you could agree, Logan, if there's any goalie that could compete with how Carey Price has looked, it is Andrei Vasilevsky.
Absolutely. And his shutouts have come in huge games, right? I mean, these are like clinching games that you've had to really shut down the opposition. That's what made game 6 of the Islander-Tampa game so unbelievable. Tampa was up 2-0 more than halfway through the game, and we're thinking, well, they're not going to score through in Vasilevsky now. That's it, game over. But they did, and the Islanders were resilient. Good for them. But that's how shocked we were. When someone scores 3 goals, 4 goals on Vasilevsky, now you're thinking, wow, they've done something that not a lot of teams can do. This is the 2 best goalies in the league. And during the regular season, everyone was down on Carey Price, and rightfully so. He was a little injured, banged up. Numbers weren't looking too good. But there's a difference between that and then playoff Carey Price, right? So this is the 2 best right now for a cup final.
Hey, I've been saying it this whole time. This is what playoff P should play like. Not the NBA version. Take your NBA version out here. This is what playoff P is. Playoff Price. This is how it should be. Bring your team to a championship. That's how it works.
Well, when you talk about the Islanders running into the Lightning and them getting unlucky with the matchup, for the casual hockey fans, I would say that the Lightning right now are like when LeBron was in the East with the Cavs a few years ago. Toronto couldn't get to the finals. Boston couldn't get to the finals. No one can get to the finals. They have to run into LeBron. This is like the Lightning right now.
So speaking of just the Lightning going crazy, unfortunately, they just scored on my man Carey Price. Score, guys, right now is 1-0 Lightning. Still early, though. 9 minutes left in the first period. Still plenty of time. Montreal can hopefully pull something out. But I want to bring up a fact that many people didn't know. I didn't know until this morning, actually. Joel Armia, the forward, actually was ruled out due to COVID protocol. Then he was ruled okay to play and took a private jet down to Tampa, but they ultimately decided that it was all right for him to just not play this game. Maybe it's because they didn't have home ice advantage or what it might not be. How big a deal is it that he's missing tonight? And is it just, do you see it the way I'm seeing it, kind of almost where they're just like, forget it, you know what, let's just take this game. We still got another one, game 2 over there in Tampa. Hopefully we could grab that one. Or what was the logic behind not letting him play even though he took the flight down there?
Well, there's been a lot of shifting around the Montreal lineup from the beginning of the playoffs, right? I mean, Jake Evans is in the lineup today, I believe, and he was knocked out from that Scheifele hit. Scheifele was suspended. Evans is back in, right? I mean, Lehkonen dropped in for Evans when he got injured, and Caulfield didn't even start the playoffs in the lineup. So there's been a lot of shifting. They got depth, man. They really do. And they got deep, reliable forwards. And I think Montreal right now feels comfortable about slotting different guys in. It's okay if one guy's out, if he's injured, okay, next man up. It's that kind of mentality. They've thrived with that mentality. So I don't think they're panicking at all if someone goes down, unless it's one of the big top 6 guys. But other than that, they can kind of fill in.
Logan, tell me now, at the very beginning of the playoffs, because I had this reaction as well, like when they didn't immediately have like Caulfield, and I think Kotkaniemi, if I'm not mistaken, one of the first 2 games he wasn't in the lineup, like you were confused as well, right? Because I'm like, these young kids were showing something at the end of the regular season, and we were talking about them way back in our preview, like, hey, for Montreal, like if they're going to take some steps, they need some of these young guys to perform in the playoffs. And then look what happens towards the very beginning of that Toronto series. They're struggling. They put the young kids in there. They start to help in the little areas. And then as it goes on, you see them develop. Caulfield has shown like he'll be a very good goal scorer in the league. Lehkonen, he scored one of the big game winners in that Vegas series as well. Like he is Montreal has shown, like you said, they have depth. And against this Tampa Bay team, like I've highlighted it throughout the playoffs, you need depth to beat this team because it's Kucherov, Point, Stamkos, Johnson, Palat, Killorn, Coleman, Gaudreau. And I'm not even done. I haven't even gotten to the defense yet, and that's how deep they are. So if you're going to beat Tampa Bay, you need depth. And of any of the teams remaining to go up against Tampa, maybe not from a talent perspective, like just based off of eye test, but from a, like we already said, a built to win perspective. I think Montreal was probably the best bet because I don't think, my opinion, Vegas, like they had the talent, but once you start to get to those 3rd, 4th lines, that's how Tampa Bay became champions. They built the 3rd and 4th lines on that team.
Yeah, I think Vegas was a product of Montreal's strong defensive play. I really think, I know everyone's ripping on Vegas right now, saying, where's the goal scoring? Where's this? Where's that? You know what? We have to give credit to Montreal because, okay, Toronto, you shut them down. We can point to the Leafs and say, how can you blow it? Winnipeg, you can say you folded. But you know what? They've done it 3 times now. So there comes a point where we have to point to Montreal and say, you know what? Good on you because you've shut down 3 really good teams here. We can't always point to Toronto, Winnipeg, Vegas and say you guys failed. You know what? This might be about Montreal now, and this is their run. I think that with Tampa, it's a clinic. That's the problem. I mean, when they get going too, and they're tough to beat at home. I mean, for them to have home ice advantage, it's a problem. That I was feeling good about Carolina a little bit because they had home ice advantage against Tampa. I'm thinking if there's a series that Tampa can get knocked, it's Carolina. That didn't happen, and here is the Lightning. If Price isn't standing on his head when Tampa's pressuring, I don't know what to tell you, right? I mean, this just might be Tampa's era, and their era includes 2021.
So, speaking of 2021, a big difference this year is these 2 clubs actually have not played each other at all this year due to, this whole weird COVID season and whatnot. Do you think that's something that could become an advantage for Montreal, considering the fact that Tampa hasn't seen them all year when in a normal season, they're both in the Atlantic Division, they would see each other on a normal basis?
I think it's a good point because I think it favored Montreal in the Vegas series. I think Vegas was caught off guard. They came in overconfident. They said the winner of the Colorado-Vegas series is going to the finals because we're playing the Canadian team, and that division sucks, right? So you really got to think about it. Would that catch Tampa off guard? I'm not too sure. We have to remember, in a normal year, Tampa and Montreal are in the same division, so they do play each other quite a bit. Vegas and Montreal, that's an obscure matchup to begin with. I think Vegas was definitely caught off guard, but Tampa's too good for that, I think. And I think they're incredibly well coached in the sense that they probably did talk about what you just talked about and said, we haven't seen these guys. Let's adjust. Let's make sure we're prepared for that.
Yeah, Logan, I think one of the key things I wouldn't be surprised, looking back at it, is that this season, as we got deeper in the playoffs, past the first two rounds, like I wouldn't be surprised if in the Islander and Lightning series and the Montreal Vegas series, like there was a lot of like tape grinding going through on both sides because you need to see as much tape of these teams as you can. Because like you said, it's completely different. Like with Vegas and Montreal in a regular year, opposite conferences, they would have met in the Cup Finals. Like that would be the only time they would have faced in the playoffs. With these two teams, like you say, them seeing each other, it's one thing. So maybe it could be a little bit less, but definitely on both those sides, I would have to imagine a lot of tape, and especially with how Carey Price has been and the way they've done it. Because going into that Vegas series, you could say about Montreal, and I think this is something they need to try to key in on in this series, is that down the middle, like Montreal center depth is very good. Suzuki he blossomed this season into a very good two-way player. You gave him credit, Philip Deneau. Like you talk about two-way players, Philip Deneau, he learned under Jonathan Toews in Chicago about that two-way game. And Jonathan Toews, three-time Cup champion, captain, Conn Smythe winner. Like that's the guy that you want to, he gained all that knowledge from him and to bring it here. I think, like you said, Logan, Montreal, this ain't no joke that they're here. Like they deserve all the credit in the world. And it doesn't matter whose side you're on, who you pick. Like this series, it will be shocked if it doesn't go at least to 6 or 7. Like we will legitimately be shocked.
I'm with you. And I know a lot of people would say, no, Tampa's going to figure it out and they're going to sweep them, or it's going to be a gentleman's sweep. That was a very sharp point you made about Deneau and Toews, the relation there. I think that's a great thing to bring up because a lot of people are wondering, Philip Deneau, shutdown center like this, where did it come from? Maybe, you know what, over the years, it was kind of in him and it's developed. And Nick Suzuki, I'm going to throw a comparison out there for you right now, but I think a young Patrice Bergeron, he kind of looks like him.
Yes.
Very much like him. And I think with Suzuki, they also benefited greatly. The chemistry between him and Caulfield, I mean, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? This is like the best duo in hockey right now. And how can that happen? This is a kid, Caulfield, who, when we did that show, Jurg, it was the World Junior Gold Medal game, Canada-USA. Caulfield was in that game, and now here he is in the Stanley Cup Final. So it's amazing how fast things change and how quickly Montreal benefited from all the things that were thrown at them.
Yeah, it all ties together. It all beautifully weaves its way into one thing for us, and we're definitely going to be enjoying game one whenever we finish up here. But of course, before we transition to baseball, we kind of have to do the thing. And James, I want you in on this too. Stanley Cup prediction, really fast, Logan. Who do you have winning?
I'm going to go Lightning in 6.
Okay, James.
Montreal in 7.
That's fair. Honestly, that's fair. I have Tampa in 7 because I think we're all on the same wavelength. Like Carey Price ain't letting this go below 6. Like none of us believe this is going below 6. I think personally at game 6 in Montreal down 3-2, I just think that home energy would be so much that it could actually propel them to that game 7. But I ultimately do have Tampa Bay winning, mainly because like I've said this the entire time. Like I'm a man of my word. If I have one thing in this world, it is my word. And I've said Tampa's going to repeat since the offseason, and I'm going to stick with it. So, but speaking of, I say I'm going to stick with it. Major League Baseball would not like hearing me say those words. So, guys, of course, about a week and a half ago or so at this point, Major League Baseball came down with its regulations of how they're going to handle any and all sticky business coming from now on when it comes to the pitchers, constantly checking them throughout the games, whether it's starters, relief, closers, making sure that there's no substance or substance-like thing on the glove, hand, whatever, and making sure that it's all settled. And it turns out that someone finally committed a no-no when it came to that. Someone finally got their sticky hand cut in the cookie jar. And according to the league, they probably weren't able to get their hand out of that jar per se, considering there was a substance there, or at least that's what they are going to say. The player, of course, is arguing that of course, being Hector Santiago of the Seattle Mariners. Logan, very, very quickly, go through like what were your thoughts when you first heard like that ruling was going to be made about this whole thing because of spider tack and pine tar, and then what was your reaction to Santiago being the first player caught with it and being ejected from a game?
My reaction initially was, this is very sudden. We're doing it very fast. I thought that, you know what? You would think that they would kind of be ahead of the game and implement this in spring training and take it from there. But that's not the case. Okay, and that's fine. So we have to work with what we have here. And I think that everyone should work together. You know, I think it's very important. There's no CBA guys next year. Okay, so this is a very dangerous game to play, by the way. And when it comes to checking pitchers, I'm okay with it right now. I think that it's going to improve the whole system. I think by the time we talk next year, things are going to be different and it's going to be more efficient. But when umpires are checking pitchers in the middle of the inning, I take issue with that. I think that the momentum of the game is very important. We talk about pace of play how many times a day, and that is anti-pace of play. In the middle of an inning checking a pitcher, you got to wait till the inning's over. I thought that was a logical rule to put in, and I expect Major League Baseball to put in that rule. I'd be shocked if they didn't. What if we're in the World Series and it's Game 7 and a pitcher's throwing really well and we're all enjoying this outing that he's putting on, historic outing, and the opposing manager says, hey, can you check him? I'm a little suspicious. We're not going to allow that to happen, are we? We can't. So I was shocked that we would be in a position where we're checking in between innings. Santiago on the Mariners, I'm surprised that someone got caught this quickly, to be quite honest with you. I thought that if someone's going to get caught, it would take a couple more weeks at least. He's claiming that it was just rosin, and with the sweat, it makes it sticky. And we knew that this was coming. There's going to be disputes about what it is. Oh, no, he didn't cheat. Yeah, but he did, right? And now we're caught in a huge dispute. And it's a headache, guys. I got to be honest with you.
I love how you brought up how quick someone got caught. My question here is just like, what if at the Game 7 you brought, what if someone got caught there or like to get checked there? I'll give you the complete opposite. What if we do catch someone in, let's say, a Game 7, they are having a historic debut and they actually did have sticky stuff on them? What should be what do you think the rule should be to counteract this or whatnot? Because, I mean, if you catch the pitcher and you do eject them from the game, yes, you're ejecting whatever, they be a reliever or starter out the game, fine. That'll make some kind of a difference. But the damage is already done. We could be 5 innings deep of just shutout baseball. I'm not going to get any runs back or anything. I saw this tweet saying that they believe if a pitcher is caught, the team with the pitcher who got caught, they should be charged a grand slam or somewhere around that area. What's your thoughts on something like that?
Well, we can't do that, first of all. We can't be adding runs for another team when they didn't hit the ball out of the ballpark when there's men on base. But here's the thing. It's an interesting idea to punish them a little more if it's in the postseason, right? Because it's the postseason, it's the end of the year. There could be someone who's being very sneaky about this that can think, hey, let's just cheat in the postseason because it's the postseason, right? The season's done. You know what? We'll take a suspension next year. That's fine. If it helps us get closer to the World Series, let's do it. That's sneaky thinking. And is there anything in place right now to prevent anyone from doing that? I don't know. It's a 10-game suspension right now. But what if it does happen in the postseason, right? And what if there's a team that says, yeah, we cheated. What are you going to do? Suspend us 10 games. Do it, right? They'd be fine if it's in October, right? Oh, yeah, suspend us in April. That's fine. See you next year. Right. So there needs to be something in place to prevent that. Absolutely. I think it's a good point. We got to start talking about the postseason when we get there. Right. Well, it's all fun and games. We can have the discussions in July. What about October?
It's like that point where if something's going to mess with someone, they go, you know what? It's not messing with me now. I'm not going to complain about it. But then when the end result comes and they realize it was that one point that might have had them winning it. Whoa. No, all of a sudden, hang on. We go back and then I won that. So, you know, it's definitely something that should be brought up before the postseason starts. Another thing that I want to bring up is these 10 games, they kind of essentially mean nothing because let's say, yeah, you're suspended to 10 games. Sure, you'll miss out on 10 games, but they're getting fully paid for this. This is a paid vacation, essentially. So aside from slight embarrassment, what's really the punishment here? What's stopping players from not using this stuff anyway?
Well, when I first heard 10 games, I'm thinking, okay, that's kind of like the first outlying rule that they'll present, and I expect it to go up, right? I mean, I think 10 games, I didn't think that, they didn't want to go crazy with it and say, okay, it's going to be like PEDs, we'll suspend you 50, 60, 80, whatever it is now. I didn't think they were going to do that so quickly. So I do expect it to go up, right? 10 games for a pitcher. If you're a starter, that's 2 starts. It's 2 starts.
If that, it could even be 1 start, possibly.
It could be 1 start. Yeah, and if you're a reliever, I guess it's a little more significant. But at the end of the day, a lot of teams have a lot of depth when it comes to their minor league bullpens and their systems, and they can fill it out quickly. Unless you're Josh Hader or Aroldis Chapman, then I guess it becomes an issue. But 10 games doesn't seem like a lot, right? Especially from some of the suspensions we've seen in this game over the last few decades. So I expect that to go up for sure.
I definitely think the long-term implications that you guys are bringing up here is a critical factor to this, because I heard a former Marlins president, David Sampson, talking about this, where when it comes to like the real stuff behind this, like he's talking straight up because he was an executive, he dealt with all this. He's saying straight up like this is all about the CBA, because I think, Logan, you bring up the 10-game suspension, could it go up? Like the MLB Players Association and the union and the owners, I think this is just the beginning of a very ugly ordeal that we're going to see carry over into the offseason between both sides, because like you guys said, what's at stake for some of these guys other than embarrassment? I think starters are relatively safe. But like you mentioned, because the MLB, it's all about value. And if you're a reliever, like not the closer, but let's say if you're one of like the long relievers, you're making $3 million a year, right? Let's say you get caught with this, whatever, you're suspended those 10 days, and they bring up one of their kids from AA, and let's say you were supposed to have 3 appearances, and in that kid in those 3 appearances, he does just as good as you. He's at a way cheaper price tag. So like this is going to be something I think the Players Union is going to try to argue against as much, because in very specific situations, this could cost some guys some of their money, whether it be future earnings or even current earnings. So that's something I think is going to be brought up. Overall, this is just going to be an ugly thing that is going to set both sides at war. And let's be honest here, when it comes to the Players Union, the owners, it's not necessarily something that's uncommon when we think back to the very beginning of the pandemic and all, and getting last season started, and how much I don't know what you want to call it, garbage we have to go through as fans and as media to finally get it going. But like you guys said, when you talk about Game 7 and situations like that, let's just talk about the big situations itself and big names. So very recently, Gerrit Cole had an off night against the Boston Red Sox, got absolutely slammed against, 3 homers off of him. First multi-home run game against them in quite a while, I think. If there wasn't another one recently, like it's been quite a while since. So we talk about these guys and why they were using it. I think there's legitimate argument to use pine tar and spider tack and whatever to a small extent, because James is a big Mets fan. He said Pete Alonso himself said it best. It's like, I would rather a guy uses it to get a little bit of control to make sure there's not a 90+ mile per hour ball coming at my head, and like 2 days later there's a ball that goes straight at his head. The poetry of baseball, sometimes it's dangerous. So I think with the Gerrit Cole off night, he's not the only one. We're just saying him specifically because, of course, he's one of, if not the best pitcher in the game. He's up there. So what do you think, Logan, of the off night he had against Boston? Is it a blip? Does it just so happen, like, because everyone has an off night, right? Unless you're Jacob deGrom. Everyone has an off night. So was this just that off night that Cole was bound to have, especially against Boston? Boston, New York, such a big thing. Like, there's more emotion in that one for the Boston hitters. Or could this potentially be a trend? And not like every game is going to be like this, but we're going to see at least a bit of a sharp downturn from that sub-2 ERA that Cole had to maybe now it's going to be 2.5, 2.75 more consistently.
It definitely could go to that. But the Yankees and Red Sox, they've played 6 times this year. Boston's won all the games. So I think we can talk about Gerrit Cole all day, but the Yankees have some much bigger issues to deal with right now. This team, there's some areas of it that really need to be addressed. And Gerrit Cole, he's been part of a relatively strong Yankees staff this year. I think they've been relatively good. And there's a lot of holes in the lineup right now. There's issues with the lineup. There's issues of where guys are playing in the field. And I think they have a much bigger issues to deal with. I mean, you cannot get swept at Fenway in the position that you're in that division. Look at the standings, guys. I mean, you're kind of looking at the Rays and Red Sox if it continues at this rate for another week or a week and a half, they're going to run away with the division, both those teams. So the Yankees got much bigger issues to deal with. I think with Gerrit Cole, some of his starts have been still good after all of this. I think the story about foreign substances broke on June 8th. So if we're going from there, he's had some relatively strong starts in Minnesota, in Buffalo against the Blue Jays. He was quite good. But this one for sure, every time Gerrit Cole isn't dominant, we're going to have this conversation, I feel like, right? I mean, because he is kind of the guy. He was asked that question about Spider Tack, and you saw his answer. Even people who don't watch baseball saw that answer. So he's one of the guys that people are looking at. It's intriguing for sure. Trevor Bauer, he's pitching tonight against the Giants. Another guy. Whenever he's pitching now, we're kind of looking at it a little closer. How's he going to do? How's this? How's that? Right? So I think it's all lumped together. But when it comes to Cole specifically with the Yankees, they have much bigger issues to deal with. And it starts with their lineup.
I've never heard a prettier sentence than the Yankees got bigger issues to deal with. But like you said, honestly, I think it's almost that time for the Yankees to break glass in case of emergency. And hopefully they can even hit the glass, because the way it's looking like on their lineup, they ain't getting many hits over there. But it's really an eyebrows raised with Gerrit Cole, because like you said, they couldn't afford to have lost this series against the Red Sox right here, because the Red Sox are a half a game. No, they're still first in the division, and Tampa's only half a game behind them. Then you got the Blue Jays, who's a whole game ahead of the Yankees, and they're like 6 games behind the first wild card, the second wild card at this point. So the Yankees are really getting to a territory they don't want to be in. And when you're getting swept is one thing, but then when you lose a game that when it's almost like when Jacob deGrom's on the mound for the Mets. When Gerrit Cole's on the mound for the Yankees, that's supposed to be an automatic W counted on your list. So when you're giving up those games as well, it's just that's absolutely the last thing you need to happen, especially when it's coming against your AL East rival. So the real question I have here is, should you be worried about Chapman as well? Because yes, Gerrit Cole has been he's been dominant, but nowhere near as dominant as the starting pitcher he has, but he's still a great pitcher. Aroldis Chapman, on the other hand, now an eyebrow should be raised for him, because he was one of the best closers in baseball. In the past 2 weeks, he's been looking a little iffy. So should they be more worried about Chapman than they are about Gerrit Cole?
They maybe, in a sense. I think it's a fair question to bring up. Now, Chapman, he was so good to the point where even if he allowed a couple home runs, his ERA was still phenomenal, right? I mean, remember that outing in Minnesota he threw 9 pitches, gave up, 4 runs? It was
4 runs on 9 pitches, yep.
It was something crazy. And that was kind of the first blip on the radar, right, for Aroldis Chapman. But I kind of look at his outings, and I look at his splitter in particular. When his splitter's on, it's incredible, and he still has that pitch. He's incorporated that pitch into his arsenal now, and I think it's going to do wonders for him either way. I still look at him as an elite guy. I wouldn't take anyone else. It's him and Josh Hader for me as guys I'm taking the back end of the pen. So I wouldn't be too worried about the pitching necessarily for the Yankees. I think that they need a little more life. They're not an athletic team. They don't get on base enough. They were losing 3-0 to the Red Sox on Saturday night at one point, and it felt like 10-0 for some reason. And no one can explain why. That's how lifeless the Yankees were. So I think the lineup, there's guys struggling, right? But I will say this for Yankees fans. There are a couple guys in AAA that they should keep an eye out for, and moves should be coming soon. I think it's a money thing right now, because we just talked about it. Jurg, you talked about it. You said if there's a guy who gets suspended and then his replacement pitches well, he's cheaper, right? Well, right now with the Yankees, Rougned Odor, he was kind of given away for free from Texas, and the Yankees want to milk that as much as they can instead of calling someone up and adding someone on the 40-man roster, which would cost millions, right? So they're saving money themselves, which I think is hurting the team right now.
Oh, yeah, and I definitely, when it comes to both those guys, this is definitely going to be something interesting to watch. And I kind of, maybe last question is about like the whole MLB situation with it. As we start to advance in the season, like what is your thought process? Because like you said, very quickly we had the first person get ejected for this. As we go on into the year, like what is the reaction going to be when it comes to these guys, whether they get caught or not, or the off performances from some of these guys, from like a Cole or a Bauer? Like, I think we can all agree. I don't think it's fair for these guys to get this kind of talk around them when it comes to these off starts they're going to have. But do you just like, I hate to put it in such a negative light because I try to keep it positive with both our leagues, but like, has Major League Baseball kind of shot itself in the foot when it comes to like negative conversations about the game, like going forward this year? Because now when Cole has a bad night or when Bauer has a bad night, like the first thing we're going to bring up is Spider Tack. And that's the last thing that they wanted us to bring up here. So I don't know. I think we can agree. I'm just going to pose a question like, how wrong, not wrong, but how bad of timing was it for a decision overall by Major League Baseball to do this now, like to do it right now?
I think the positive spin on the whole thing is that, you know what, we're going to get used to it. And there's going to be a time, I don't know when that will be. It could be next year. It could be next month. But there's going to be a time when we do stop talking about Spider Tack, right? This is relatively a fresh issue. It's in everyone's mind. It's become a joke almost for some people just to talk about it for the sake of it. And there's going to come a time where we get used to it. We're not going to be talking about Gerrit Cole next year in 2022. If he has an off night, right, that's last year's news, right? There might be something else at that time. Let's hope not. But that's what we have to put the positive spin on. And we're going to get used to it, and improvements will be made. And then as observers of the sport, we'll make adjustments ourselves.
For sure. I love how you brought up that it's going to be a whole different story next year. If there is, I've been preaching it for weeks already. I think the news story next year is it's going to be a strike. I think there's a strike impending due to just the way the union's handling this, the league's handling this. You got Max Scherzer dropping his pants. You got Sergio Romo literally just getting butt down naked, so it's just not a good. There's some entertainment factor to this whole thing, but you could just see the ugliness of what was supposed to be contract negotiations and things happening behind doors just now spewing out on the field where it shouldn't even have anything to do with it at that going moment.
Yeah, you know what? It's one of those things. There's always a cloud over something, it seems like, right? We can talk about this or that. The last thing the MLB wants people to talk about in June or July of 2021 is a potential strike. There's an all-star game coming up. We're getting through a very good season here where there's packed houses, there's fans in the ballparks, something we didn't see last year, and a strike still. We're going to talk about it, right? The concern, I think, started for a lot of people last May and June, right? It was what's going on at Major League Baseball. And then we started to anticipate that there's a little tension, and if there was ever a time when they needed to agree on a CBA, they might not be able to do it, right? And it started last year, and a lot of people haven't forgotten. James, you haven't forgotten. You're bringing it up right now, right? So it is in the mind of a lot of people. We'll see. And Jurg, we need to stay positive, I guess.
Oh yeah, we definitely need to stay positive. Like I in my personal life, it's a different story. But like when I'm on the show, like I want us to be positive when it comes to the NHL and the MLB because we love both these leagues. We love the sports. We want it to do well. So with the theme of staying positive about everything, our last little segment here for baseball talking, last segment of the show today, will actually, put a positive spin on things. When we talk about the good things of Major League Baseball this season, one of the things I think we need to accentuate is the fact that the young guns are coming out this year. Like we've had great players from both leagues, from several teams, just absolutely show out this season. Kids we've been waiting on to have that breakout campaign finally have it. A couple weeks ago, myself and James, we were talking about some breakout stars so far this season, guys who have kind of shocked us. Well, this isn't necessarily going to be that, but this is something I'm going to bring upon to both the Major League Baseball geniuses I have up here. And there are a couple of young players who have done phenomenal so far this season. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has just been smacking it out of the park this year. We've been waiting. He's one of those guys we've been waiting on to take that leap. I think it was unfair in previous years. I think 2020, I forget what his stats were off the top of my head, but like there was a little bit of I think a lot of the players last year, 2020 was kind of like a throwaway year. And like 2021 was going to be like the real year where it's like, okay, how'd they progress? And Vladdy is one of those things. Like he is just off the charts this season, what he's done for the Blue Jays. Because like you said, Logan, earlier, with where the Yankees have been, at times they've been below the Blue Jays in the standings. And Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has been one of the reasons. So it's been him, Ronald Acuna for the Braves as they are trying to do whatever they can to stay in the playoff hunt. Thankfully in the NL East, they kind of have a chance because there ain't no one running away with that division, especially the blue and orange team. They're not running away with it by
We're still
any
in
stretch of the
first. We're still in
imagination.
first.
You're not running away with it, though. So Atlanta, you can hold out some hope there. But Acuna has been phenomenal this season, just as he has always been throughout his young career so far. Speaking of the NL East, even though they're not as good this year as previous seasons, Juan Soto, of course, is the marquee name for that Nats team when it comes to hitting. And then Fernando Tatis Jr. Like that kid is just different. Was on MLB The Show. The cover was almost the NL MVP last season. He was very close. He was top 2, top 3 in voting, if I'm not mistaken. So all the young guns put in front of you boys. The segment is essentially take your pick and rank them 1 through 4. Who would you want? You know, you get one pick, you get one hitter going forward. Rank them between those 4. So Logan, we'll start with you.
This is tough because you just brought up Juan Soto. And Juan Soto is not lighting the world on fire like a Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is this year, or like Acuna was in the first 2 months of this season. And Tatis, injury problems, but when he's on the field, he is as good as there is. I still think Juan Soto is going to be the best hitter out of all these guys. A pure hitter, okay? And I'm talking about when you look at the underlying numbers of how young he is and what he did early in his career. I think that the progression is clear for him to be the best hitter. Is he going to be the best power hitter of these guys? No, absolutely not. I think that can be Vladdy. I think that can be it could be Acuna. It could be. But right now, when it comes to pure hitter, and I know NL East, James isn't going to like this. He wouldn't like it if I said Acuna or Soto. But Soto, I still think will be the best hitter out of this cast of players.
You know, I'm a Mets fan, but I like to believe I'm not a biased fan when it comes to all my sports teams. I try keeping it as real as possible. So you're right. I would have been upset if you picked either or, but unfortunately, the one guy I'm going to go here is Ronald Acuna. He's the guy who to me, he's going to be the best hitter because he has not only the power, which is what you're saying Juan Soto doesn't have. What I'll give Juan Soto above Acuna is he might have a slightly better batting average than Acuna does when it's all said and done. But Acuna won't be too far, and he's going to have significantly more power than Juan Soto does, in my personal opinion. At the end of the day, though, between the two, I'd say it comes down to their eye, who's going to walk more, who's not going to walk more. What a lot of people are forgetting is Juan Soto actually did have COVID to begin this season, which is what's leading to his lackluster season this year. So, honestly, and he's bouncing back, man, because he started the season. His batting average after coming off COVID was like at 220 or something, and he's already back at 274, 8 home runs, 32 RBIs. So, I mean, let's see where he ends the season. But you're right. He's one of, if not the best hitter in the NL East right now. So, if I had to rank all of them, I'm taking Acuna first. I would take – that's a tough one. I'm going to take just pure hitting-wise. I'm taking Vlad second because he's just – how can you disrespect what that man's doing on the baseball field right now? Literally in the AL East, I mean, not AL East, just AL period. It's Vlad and Shohei Ohtani, who's just, before they were lined up together, Ohtani was taking another step, and then everybody else is just a far distance away for that AL MVP race. So I'm going Acuna, Vlad, Tatis, and I think it's just because he's a national man. But yeah, Soto's right there, way down low for me. Sorry, it had to be done.
Hey, that's fair. So, yeah. Logan, how would you rank the rest of the 3? So, assuming Soto is your number 1, how would you rank the remainder?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult. Like James was saying, Vladdy might be the MVP this year. It's him and Ohtani, right? So, it's 1 and 2. We'll see who comes out on top. Batter's eye, Soto's the best, right? You look at what his plate discipline is. It's actually at another level. I don't think we've seen plate discipline this good maybe since Barry Bonds, right? So, his plate discipline's incredible. Second, it's difficult. It really is. I think I'm going to go with Guerrero Jr., Acuna, and then Tatis.
Just to speak on that plate discipline, just so the viewers get a good idea about this, Juan Soto currently has 43 strikeouts, and he has 47 walks. Rarely, if ever, do you see a player have more walks than they do strikeouts. So, yeah, like, you're right. That's the one thing that's going to put him above the rest of these stars wherever they all end up in their career.
And to that point, especially with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., he's really improved on that. And his walk to strikeout ratio is also really good this year. So now he's putting himself in the conversation of being a guy who's just going to be an all-around great hitter. Draw walks. He can hit for an average. Of course, the power is on another level. So Guerrero Jr., to me, this is the blossoming. He's came into spring in good shape, right? It was something that was a concern last year. And he's playing good defense at first this year. And that was a concern for a lot of people. He's looked good over there.
Yeah, and I think with all four of these guys, it's more than just one aspect of the game. Because when you brought up earlier Soto, you think he'll be the best hitter. You're talking about everything. Like a lot of people and you could see it in different things with all sports. Like in basketball, sometimes when we talk about best offensive player, people just go straight to 3-point shooting alone. It's like there's way more than just 3-point shooting in the game of basketball. So then with baseball, when it comes to hitting, a lot of people just think immediately, how many homers does the guy hit? That's not really fair, because then Aaron Judge would have been the best hitter in his rookie season. And we know that wasn't true. He was the best masher, but he wasn't the best overall hitter. So there's dimensions to it. I'm closer to you guys than I originally thought I was going to be. I have Acuna as my number one personally, just because I think like what he's shown so far, just how talented he is for that Braves team is just it's just something special. And maybe in part because I've seen it for just a tinge bit longer than with the other guys. I think that's my very slight edge I'm giving it to him as my number one. Coming into this, I wasn't sure about Soto because I personally I just think back to the World Series where it's like Soto he was the electrifying player. Like you want to talk about just electrifying, he's one of the guys in baseball you would buy a ticket to go see. Like he's young, he's electric, he's a good hitter, he's improved. Like we talked about when he was coming in at such a young age, he was so talented, so fundamentally sound, and he's just growing on that. So it was very tough. He's kind of like my 2-3 at the moment because I can kind of see going here and there. I personally have Tatis as the other guy with my 2-3. Vladdy at my number 4 is just, it kind of feels weird saying because he has been good this season. But again, I'm kind of taking in part to like how much I've seen so far. And I think of the 4, Vladdy, I don't want to call him a late bloomer compared to the other 3, but this is his first season. We've kind of seen it from Tatis so far. I think the only thing that could drop Tatis down, like you mentioned, Logan, is the injuries. Like now he's not a terribly injury-prone player, like he'll miss half the year, but it could catch up to you if he misses 20 games this season, if he misses 20 games like next season. That could cost the Padres in the NL West race, and you need a guy, the best ability, they always say, is availability. And like those other guys, aside with Soto, because the only thing that's taken Soto out is really COVID.
Right.
Everything else, he's been there. So,
and if we want to look defensively, right? I mean, Soto would be ranked 4th here. If we're talking about defensively, Vladimir Guerrero does not play a premium position. Ronald Acuna plays center field. Okay, now we're getting into premium territory, and Fernando Tatis plays the position here that we would consider the most premium, shortstop. They need his defense to get back to 2020 Tatis and not 2019 Tatis. It was really good in 2020. 2021, it's gone off to a hit-and-miss kind of start defensively, a little more like 19. He needs to get back to 20. And then at shortstop, I mean, oh my goodness, right? I mean, you talk about the good shortstop in this league. It starts with Fernando Tatis, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. I mean, I can't think of anyone who would pass him. It's the closest person is possibly Bo Bichette, but he's not even in the same atmosphere as Tatis. Like you said, his defense needs to step up. The only thing holding him back is just he's been suffering that dislocated shoulder or whatever it is. And honestly, I think coming down the stretch of this season, we're going to probably see that kick back in because as someone who suffered all those little minor nagging injuries, like, yeah, you could play with them, but if you keep on playing with them, they catch up to you towards the end of the season. So like Jurg just said, hopefully his body holds up long enough for the Padres to hold on to that NL West because I had them ranked high going into this season. I actually believe I had them as my number 2 team. So hopefully he's able to hold all together, man.
For all these guys, by the way, because Soto obviously has just been with COVID. Tatis so far with the minor injuries. Acuna and Vladdy have relatively been fine. Vladdy, like you mentioned before, Logan, it was just like a shape thing. This is the best shape he ever came into a season here for 2021. And we hope for all 4 of these guys to continue to do this because they're 4 of the premier young players in the game. And we mentioned wanting to end it off positively. Baseball, for all the negative we say coming up for them, you have a scenario where 4 of the best players in the league right now, they're nowhere near their peak. And like you want that as a league to have that transition eventually, because even some of the guys in recent years who have came out, like Judge and Stanton, are essentially, they're old news. Now it's these 4 young kids. It's other guys that are going to come in. Heck, the Toronto Blue Jays, probably in a year or two from now, one of their other young players who's a child of one of these 90s players is going to be in this conversation, because that team is just so chock full of talented young kids. But like you said, Logan, the shortstop position, it starts and stops with Fernando Tatis being the guy. And just like the amazing combination of baseball and hockey talk starts and stops with the Bunts and Bruises podcast. Logan, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode. It was a pleasure, honor, everything we could say to have you on, man. Loved having you on.
That was fun, guys. Thanks for having me on. I'll come back anytime you want. And let's just clear this up, though. New York's a basketball town, right?
Yeah,
yeah. I would say so. It's the mecca for it. It's the mecca. But real quick, before we do truly end off, let the people know, where can they find you and all the amazing stuff you're doing right now, because we have you on for a reason. Like, you truthfully, like your work is good, man. Straight up. Like, people need to know you're doing great work out there.
Thank you, Jurg. I appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at LGL Lockhart, on Primetime Sports Talk, the Squeeze baseball podcast, covering baseball nationwide. I do that with Tyler Milliken, who's in Boston, and on Fansided NHL, and Nolan Wrighton, the Texas Rangers affiliate of Fansided.
That's awesome. Hey, like I said, he does it all, guys. He does it all. He does everything. This man, he can score goals. He can hit homers. I'm sure he's Steph Curry from the 3-point line as well.
Oh no.
I'm talking about your work. I do want to see you shoot a basketball, but I'm talking about your work. You are truly up to that level. And it was very much a pleasure and honor to have you as the first ever non-OTBN guest. And like I said before, you got an all access pass. Whenever you want to come back on, we would be more than happy and more than willing to have you, especially with baseball. The trade deadline is going to be coming up very soon. Hockey off season is going to be busy time for both these sports, and we're definitely going to be excited. But James, you're the best at this. You know, you called me the opener. I call you the closer. Take us home, my man.
You guys already know who it is. It's Bars Talks. It's Jurg K40. Twitter. We don't have a TikTok. We're going to make one, so follow us on TikTok too, as a matter of fact. Follow us, Bunts and Bruises, guys. Please like, subscribe, review, YouTube, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcast, aside from Apple. I took a break from that thing that we were arguing for weeks. You know, it was a toxic relationship. I had to give it a minute. But once again, guys, thank you for coming, joining us. We hope you had a great time. Shout out to the guest of honor, Logan Lockhart. Again, thank you for coming, man. It was a pleasure. Until next time, hopefully you see him again. We definitely see us next time, Monday, 8 p.m. Don't forget. Peace.